The Bean Boy by Monica Shannon from California Fairy Tales, Doubleday, 1927. In the years between this and that, there lived a little boy named String.
Because he used strings for shoelaces.
A red string in one shoe and a green string in the other.
Now, String lived in a lima bean field, and when the lima beans were green, he picked them, put them in sacks, and took sackfuls of green lima beans into town to sell.
So he was called the Bean Boy. One morning, String, the Bean Boy, started off for the governor's palace with a sack of green lima beans. The governor's little daughter had ordered large flat beans for her soup.
She was called Dulcie because although her eyes were dark and sad, her smile was sweet and gaudy as the red seaweed. Dulcie.
Now, Dulcie was leaning out of the palace window, watching for her sack of large flat beans. The Bean Boy came whistling into the patio of the palace, tripping over his shoestrings.
And a green string.
Always coming undone.
Dulcie ran downstairs, fetching a pan so the Bean Boy could dump out his sack of big flat beans. Then the Bean Boy sat down to tie up his green and red shoestrings. By this time, the governor's little daughter had stopped smiling, so String noticed how sad and dark her eyes looked. The little girl said,
"It must be nice to live in a bean field and bring sacks of beans into town."
It is nice, and I'm always finding things on my way in and out.
What kind of things?
Oh, tree toads and moonstones and old Spanish coins and Indian beads and kilt for dress-up helmets.
The governor's little daughter smiled her dotty smile. "Maybe you can find my dream for me."
Maybe I can.
I dreamed that my father was not a governor anymore, and he didn't need to worry about revolution. I dreamed he was an organ grinder man with a tiny tomboy monkey from Central America.
I know, and you went with him, walking through bean fields, singing, "Maria, Mia," and people filled up your cup with pennies, and you made a bonfire every night and popped corn.
Yes, and my father didn't worry any more about revolution. Just think, he didn't need to worry about revolution.
Dulcie opened her sad eyes wide open.
But I only dreamed it once. Now, do you think you can find my dream again for me?
Of course, I can find anything on my way in and out.
Then I need to marry you when you grow up tall.
At that, the Bean Boy went whistling away, tripping over his shoestrings.
A red string and a green string.
Always coming undone. Next morning, at sunup, String the Bean Boy was picking big flat beans and putting them into sacks when a goblin came hurrying up a bean row. The goblin tipped his bean leaf cap and inquired politely,
"Could you possibly spare 2 good-sized beans this morning? The finest baby of our king will be christened in 16 minutes, and I find myself without a christening present."
The polite goblin bowed as best he could, for he was a thick little person. He had a wide, cheerful mouth and looked hearty in his seaweed suit.
"Fill your cap,"
String told him, and he helped the goblin pick 8 or 10 fine lima beans. Then he said in a hurry,
"While you are here, I wish you would tell me where to find the dream of the governor's little girl, Dulcie."
"Certainly. All dreams are kept in the cave of yawns down by the sea, 2 leagues south and 2 leagues west. But remember not to yawn in the cave. Every time anyone yawns, the cave gets bigger, and if you go to sleep in there, you will never wake up."
Then the goblin hurried off to the king's baby's christening. The Bean Boy hurried off too, going 2 leagues south, 2 leagues west.
And there he was down by the sea at the Cave of Yon.
There were dark chests along the cave walls, rich hand-carved chests from which the Sandman was selecting dreams.
The Sandman stood at the farthest end of the cave, throwing a handful of sand into his bag, and then a dream. A handful of sand, and then a dream. The Bean Boy called out,
Sandman!
But when the Sandman looked up, the Bean Boy yawned. The cave got bigger, just as the polite goblin had said it would, and the Sandman was leagues farther away now.
The Bean Boy began to feel sleepy.
his hands went to sleep, his feet went to sleep, and every step pricked like pins and needles. Then the Bean Boy yawned again. And the cave got bigger, just as the polite goblin had said it would. The Sandman and the rich hand-carved chests were so far away now, they looked like dots on a dotted line.
Then the Bean Boy's ears went to sleep. And after that, his nose went to sleep. But he said to himself,
Even though I feel all over like a pincushion, I must keep my two eyes awake and walk with my feet asleep until I can nudge the Sandman and get Dulcie's dream for her.
So the Bean Boy walked with his feet asleep, his hands asleep, his ears asleep, and his nose asleep. But the jolt of tripping over his shoestrings kept his eyes awake until he nudged the Sandman.
The Bean Boy stifled an enormous yawn.
Please, may I have Dulcie's dream?
What was it like? And about how long?
Hurry, I'm gonna yawn again.
Did it have a monkey and an organ grinder in it? And a song that goes, Maria, Mia?
Yes.
The Bean Boy's eyes were closing, but he tripped over his shoestrings and opened his eyes again with a terrible effort. It's an old dream, almost worn out, so I suppose you may as well have it.
the Sandman shook the dream out, sticking his fingers through the hole, and then he handed over the tattered dream.
The Bean Boy ran from the cave with his feet asleep, his hands asleep, his ears asleep, and his nose asleep.
He was really asleep all over, except that his eyes were awake from the jolt of tripping over his shoestrings.
A red string in one shoe and a green string in the other.
Next morning, before dawn, the little boy started for town with his bean sacks and the old dream, which looked as if it were falling to pieces.
When he came near the gate to the town, he heard guns. Soldiers came out singing, Maria, Mia.
The Bean Boy went into town. The palace was in ruins, and there, on some stones, sat the governor and Dulcie. The Bean Boy noticed how sad and dark her eyes were.
It is just what I worried about.
Moaned the governor, and Dulcie told the Bean Boy, We've had another revolution.
Just then, a soldier came running up and spoke low to the governor.
Your Excellency, we must go away at once in disguise.
Where can I go? What can I do?
Whereupon the Bean Boy handed him the old worn dream. And so it happened that the governor disguised himself as an organ grinder man, owning a tiny tomboy monkey from Central America.
He and Dulcie and String the Bean Boy wandered up and down the world joyously, making bonfires every night and popping corn.
After they had wandered from one end of the world to the other, the Bean Boy married Dulcie one night by a big campfire.
And they inherited great stretches of bean fields. where they lived happily
for years
and years
and years.
and years.